Okay, today I am so excited to have with me two sisters that have shared a very interesting experience of both having a child with a rare disease. So it's a little different than the other episodes that we've had focused on the grief that follows the passing of a loved one. This is a grief that you encounter with someone who is still alive and living. So thank you, Tessa and Tanya, for being here with me and sharing your experiences. I think this is going to be really helpful for people to understand how to support someone in your situation, but also someone who is going through something similar is going to learn a lot from your wisdom. So let's start with the big sister. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a mom of 3 kids and a wife and a business owner and obviously a sister and daughter, all those things. And my son, my oldest, was born with a skeletal dysplasia, which is considered dwarfism. And so it's not really considered a disease, but it fits in that category, I guess, and it's a condition. And it affects his joints and spine and his height. And so it's been an interesting journey, I guess. I was thinking this morning, like, I don't think I experienced grief in the beginning, more just like shock and maybe like PTSD when I look back, like that kind of stuff. But grief has kind of come along the lines of, just missing things or, feeling like life isn't fair or just, gone through all of these emotions. And grief definitely has fit in there as, life just is different than I expected. And I think that's a big part of grief, right? Of grieving in any situation. I was also thinking, um, you know, there's grief around divorce and like um there's some faith crisis in my family. I was like, we've had a lot of grief and not a lot of death in our family. So
Exactly.
Right.
And the interesting thing is that a lot of people don't associate grief in those situations, but it's still a very, very real and traumatic thing that
Yes.
unless you've really gone through it, you don't, even when you go through it, you have no idea how to go through it. So,
And that's the part that's common, right?
yeah.
That's the part that common. Sometimes we say to each other, I can never imagine what you're going through. And it may be true that you don't know exactly what someone's going through, but these descriptive words you're using are common to the human experience. And that's why we're talking about it. So thank you, Tanya. Tessa, why don't you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your child?
I'm Tessa Swensen, and I live in Central Washington. I am Tanya's youngest sibling, and I am married and have 2 kids, and they have cystic fibrosis. It's a hereditary genetic mutation, which we had no idea we carried the gene for it, both me and my husband. And my oldest daughter is 8, and she was a total surprise diagnosis. And then my son is 5, and he also has it and was not quite as surprising, but still a very traumatic event occurred during that diagnosis as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you again for sharing with that. So let's start. I want to hear a little bit about these kids. Tell me what you love about them, what their strengths are, their personality, something that's unique and special about them. Tanya, again, let's start with you. I know you have 3, but we're speaking specifically about
Right. Yeah. So Calvin, he's 16 now. And he's someone that everyone notices and always has been since he was little, just like really charismatic, an old soul. He always says kind of these profound things even when he was little. He has an amazing voice, which I think is a really cool gift that he's been given. Maybe he can't walk as well or be as mobile as people, but he can use his voice for
Mhm.
good. I hope he will use it for good as he develops, and he's studying to be a voiceover actor, which is really cool. And let's see what else. He is
He's
really into
never scared to
technology.
talk to anyone either.
Yeah, he's
Like,
super social. Like,
he's super social and very, like, he doesn't care really what, maybe he cares inside, but outward, he's just will explain whatever. If people ask him what's wrong with him, he'll just say, like, he's just very, I don't know. And he's usually very optimistic and very
mhm.
just outgoing. And he's
Yeah,
just a very personal person.
right. Yeah, he seems to
That's
have this
amazing.
inner, yeah, he seems to have this inner sense of his worth, which has been
Mm.
great. Like, I was thinking this morning, you sent me the questions and about like middle school was hard, but when he was younger and now in high school, he just is like, I'm a cool kid and I don't have to let this, get me down or whatever. So I mean, it's hard and he's in a lot of pain, and a lot of times he's like, it's not fair, why do I have to go through this? But for the most part, he enjoys his life and um knows he's a special kid.
That means so much, especially when you think of how many kids his age are just saddled down with anxiety or depression or feelings of worthlessness. And here you
Mm-hmm.
have this kid who just is a ray of sunshine
Mm-hmm.
in spite of his difficulties. I think there must be something there in that.
Yeah, I agree. Because I mean,
It's
one of my other
also my
kids
sister.
really struggles with.
Tanya, I'm going to get emotional, but from the time he was 2, she always just helped him to know that he was different, but it was fine. And that he still had that worth. And she had him very like open on social media. Like, this is who I am. I might not be able to do everything that everyone else can, but I can still do amazing things. Good job, Mom.
That
Yeah, I don't know. I feel
that
like
is
a lot of it
amazing.
was inborn in him, and like one of my other kids really struggles with self-esteem, and I did too. So I don't know. I'm like, I don't think it's anything I did. At least it doesn't seem like it. Seems to have been a little bit of that inborn in him. So,
But your example obviously has made a huge difference for your sister. And
mm-hmm.
has that made a difference in how you've approached your kids, Tessa?
Just a second.
She's still crying.
Yeah. I mean, I have done a lot of work around, um, my mindset. There's nothing wrong here. Like different doesn't
Right.
mean wrong. And
Right.
like with the cystic fibrosis, I've often thought, like, if the whole world had to take enzymes and do this lung treatment, like, it wouldn't be a big deal. Like, it's just what we do, right? So there's nothing
Yep.
wrong with it. It's
Right.
just
Right.
what
Like if we
you
lived on
have
a
to do.
planet where that was your
Yeah,
condition, right?
you know? Right.
See,
Yeah.
and
Same
when
with
in our family, like, it doesn't seem weird to me until I go somewhere else, like to Tanya's house or to someone else's house where our routine is different. And then it seems weird. But Tanya's really been a huge example. Sorry. I mean, I'm not sorry. I don't apologize for my emotions. But just the work that she's done on herself has been a huge example to me, and how that has really helped my grieving process. Because I was just, for probably 5 years, was in a really dark place. And I remember her telling me one day, like, I could have found everything wrong with my husband or with my family, but then I knew that I needed to do the work on myself, and it changed everything.
Mhm.
And that sticks in my mind all the time. And that's kind of what kicked me into gear of, you know what, your life, you might feel like it sucks. You might feel like you're the only one, but do the work for you and it will help. And it's made a huge difference. And that's really been like my focus the past year, is working on myself. And I didn't realize like how much grief that I had until
Mhm.
So when you're in it, you don't know. Like you just feel kind of numb. You're overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's one thing. If people are hurting or feel horrible or not themselves how they used to be, go have someone help you and figure out what it is you're feeling and get through it. So that's another thing Tanya's really been a good example of.
I love that. That's such a great insight. And has that resonated with your children? Have you seen them respond differently to you as you have changed as a person?
Tanya or me or both?
Well, I was thinking you, Tessa, in particular.
100%. I was like so anxious and I would just yell at my kids all the time. And that was just, yeah, 100%. And my husband has noticed, sometimes when you're changing, you don't really notice, but like people have told me like, you're just so different. And yeah, I am so much more calm. I can parent my kids the way I'm supposed to because I'm not just always in fight or flight mode. That's what I was. I was always in fight or flight. I would get so agitated and annoyed, like just on a dime, just
wow. For
blow
5
up.
years,
So,
you're saying?
that was probably the 7 years.
Wow.
6 years. So
that's a very powerful idea, that just changing your mindset, changing your focus on how you can improve, deal with the situation could make such a huge impact.
There's also a lot of medication in there too. I'm not going to say it was all mindset, but that's another thing. A lot of people like are ashamed that they can't take the right medication, but sometimes you do. Sometimes you just need it. And that's, but
well, your kids need enzymes, right? Your kids need enzymes.
Exactly.
And tell me more about your kids. Tell me about your 2 kids.
My kids blow my mind every day. My daughter, she is like the most responsible person. She's only 8.5, and like she's just so responsible, and she is the most compassionate person. Oh. If she notices that you're like emotional or struggling with something or crying, she will just come to you and be with you, and will try to help you in any way that you can. Like I threw my back out last month and she was just on top of it asking, can I make lunch for Axel? Can I do this? Like, what can I do? Do you need me to stay home from school so I can help you? Like an 8-year-old you don't think would think about this stuff.
Right.
But with a lot of that compassion, it always brings anxiety. She already has some anxiety issues. She just thinks a lot about stuff. And so that's been interesting to see and kind of process how we're going to take care of that.
You mean that her anxiety? You mean that her anxiety comes from the fact that she is so caring about others, and
that, and then also like with cystic fibrosis, you have to. Most of her life was very routine and regimental. Like you have to take this medicine when you eat, or you're going to die. Like you have to do this every day or you're going to die. So
really?
Not like she would die
that
day, but so how we found out about her, she was 6 weeks old and was lower than her birth weight. She was very, very failure to thrive. And what happens with CF, with most kids with CF, their body doesn't produce the pancreatic enzymes that break down your food. So all of the nutrition just goes right through you. And so
oh my.
Yeah. So they have to take medication before they eat. And so it at first was a life of very much, we have to do this and this and this and this. And if anything went out of routine, it was very hard for her. Just a lot of anxiety.
And this is your first baby, 6 weeks.
This is my first baby.
So 6 weeks of probably torture, hell. And were you thinking, boy, this new mom stuff is harder than I thought because you didn't have a diagnosis yet?
I don't know. Like we were just kind of, I don't know.
I'm sure it was a thought anyway, right? You never remember when
my husband was going to school full time. I was working full time, and with a new baby, like And then I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes right after that.
Mm.
So I kind of just blocked that whole year out. But yeah, we didn't really know. We just thought she was little until we would take her to the doctor and they were like, oh, you probably need to start feeding her with a bottle. Something's wrong with your milk supply. And then we got the call from the like the 2-week or the 4-week heel prick screening. And that's when they said something's up. We need to do more testing. So
I want to put a pause on that because I want to hear about Axel. Is that your son? And then I want to get back to that experience that you had.
Okay, so he is 5, and he's a little bit like Calvin. They are a little bit similar when they were each other's age. Calvin was like the most techie person, and he could like build anything out of Legos, and it was so fun to watch him grow in his mind. And Axel is very similar. He loves robots and building stuff, and he says his prayers and blesses that he could be a robot builder like every night.
That's
and
cute.
it just makes me laugh. But he is the silliest person. Ever since he was like 2, he would just joke with you. Like, here's this pencil, or here's these scissors. Those aren't scissors. Yes, they are. No, they're not. And he would like, I know that they're scissors, but I'm just going to joke with you that they're not. So yeah, he's a tease. Very happy.
Aww.
He has the big emotions. He's either very happy or very sad and crying. So big emotions.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So now going back, tell me about when you discovered that your child's life would be more challenging, and how did you react to that? How did your husband react? What were some of your early thoughts? And you can choose, who wants to go first with that.
You want to go first, Tanya?
Sure. Okay, so, well, Calvin, when he was born, to me, he looked weird. Like his body looked misshapen. And we brought it up to the pediatrician, and he's like, oh, no, he's fine. It's just been crammed in your womb, So, but about 24 hours later,
is your oldest, right? So this is
yeah,
your
he's
first,
the oldest. So first baby, and I had an emergency C-section. Like it was kind of traumatic. Anyway, and so then 24 hours later, they came in and said his breathing hasn't normalized, so we're just going to go take an X-ray of his lungs and see what's going on. So on the X-ray, it showed that he didn't have collarbones, which was weird. And so he was diagnosed with a specific condition that's characterized by no collarbones. And that was it. Like they didn't really look into anything else. And so, that was a rare thing too. And we're like Googling it, and it was really kind of traumatic, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, but then like we were going to physical therapy every week because he couldn't like raise his head and roll over and all these things that normal babies could do. And about a year in, one of the physical therapists was like, there's something not right here. Like this. And we connected with some people with this thing. And I was like, you know how people with Down syndrome look the same? Like this, this other thing, like all the people kind of look the same. And I was like, he doesn't really look like that. Like he doesn't have the specific characteristics. And so, the physical therapist was like, there's something wrong with his joints. Like they pop, they won't move this way. Like we need to see what's going on with his joints. So they sent us to Seattle Children's Hospital and x-rayed his whole body. And that was a terrible experience. My husband and I had to hold him down for like an hour while he screamed the whole time. And they would press down on each part of his hands and legs and stuff to x-ray. And so then we go into a room and wait for like what seemed forever. And then finally the doctor and the geneticist came in, and then all these interns and more doctors into this tiny little room. And they said, well, we think it's this thing called metatropic dysplasia, but we don't know because we've never seen it before. Like never in the history of Seattle Children's Hospital.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a specialty teaching hospital.
Yeah. So they sent the x-rays to Cedars-Sinai in LA. There was a doctor there who kind of specialized in this. And then they had just recently found the gene marker for the specific thing. So they were able to do genetic testing and confirmed it with that. So he's like missing a little piece of code in his DNA. And so, yeah, so that confirmed it. And they basically were like, don't Google it because it'll freak you out. And they gave us there was this tiny paragraph from like the Mayo Clinic or something on what it was, right? So of course we Googled it.
I know, like, how are you not going to?
Yeah. And there's all these there wasn't much on the internet about it, but there's pictures of these extremely deformed infants that, you know, died and like, or, you know, just not great stuff. But I found one woman who had a blog about her child with it. And so I was able to connect with her. And then eventually they formed a Facebook group. So we've been able to connect with people all over the world with this specific condition. So, but I didn't know it was dwarfism until months later, just doing some research. And that to me was devastating. I don't know why. Like, I just, like the other stuff, I was like, oh yeah, this is some kind of weird condition. But then to find out, you know, I don't know why. Like later doing all this work on myself, I'm like, it's not a big deal. Like, he's going to be short. But for some reason that just like really was a kind of just a realization to me, like, oh, they didn't tell me this is a type of dwarfism. Right. I just found that out later. So, but you asked how my husband dealt with it, I guess. Well, I mean, we found out the day he was born, right? There's something different going on. And to me, I mean, it's like Dumbo's mom, right? Like, you unconditionally love your baby from the moment they're born, right? Like, this is my baby. And so, you know, that was normal, you know, and you have all these joys of having this new baby, but also extra challenges. And I had that kind of trauma from the birth. And so I'm the one doing all the research and like taking the therapy and stuff. Right. And then my husband just way more chill. Like, he's just like, oh, you know, everything's going to be fine. There's nothing wrong with him. And he's just very accepting, you know, and it was interesting because he doesn't have a good relationship with his dad. And he was kind of afraid to have kids. Like, he was like, I don't know if I'm going to be a good father, you know, all these things. So, but he just took to it. He's just a really great dad. And I remember one time Calvin was probably 5 months old or so. And I wanted to go meet his dad. I had never met his dad before. And he just didn't want
Your
to
husband's
have anything
dad?
to do with him. Yeah, my husband's dad. Okay. And so we were discussing, like, he was just like, absolutely not. We're not going to see him. And I'm just trying to understand, you know, I'm like, please help me understand why, you know, is he this terrible, terrible person? Which I've since met him and he's a great guy. So, but he was holding Calvin and looking down at him and saying, like, I look at my baby and I just can't imagine ever leaving him or abandoning him, you know? And he's like, why did my dad leave me? You know? So that kind of gave me some insight into how he felt as a dad. And we don't really talk a lot about how dads bond with their babies or feel that kind of innate need to protect them or whatever, which he really feels. And but yeah, we still kind of have the same role as like, I'm the one going to the doctor and learning all the things and feeling all the stress, and he's just like, everything will be fine, it'll all work out. So I think we have a good balance with those things, you know. So, and he's really supportive and has good insurance, which is a really important thing.
That's huge.
Yeah. But one thing I feel like Tessa mentioned, being in this kind of dark place for a long time, which I have been as well. And just thinking about, like, lately I've been making healthy lunches for my kids and like being involved in their activities. And those are things I always wanted to do as a mom. And we have an excellent mom who is a stay-at-home mom and just like super involved and always, you know, super clean house, meals every night. And I felt as a mom, like I just couldn't do those. I just didn't have the energy. Like, you know, I'm going to therapy. I'm thinking about all these extra things. They're in pain. Like, and I've always felt guilty about that, you know, like I really want to be this kind of mom, but just have not felt like I had the energy, I guess, or, you know, like just I think that's one thing for people to understand of parents with a rare disease kid is there's just so much more weight and things you have to do. And just like trying to find shoes and clothes that fit, like so much more time and energy and money and on things that shouldn't matter, right? Like,
Exactly.
you should just be able to go to the store and buy a pair of shoes for your kid. So I'm finally, like, lately I've been feeling like I'm able to do some of those things, which is really awesome. Like, yeah, I don't know where that's going, but I've been thinking about that lately, just how it's so much extra and people don't understand.
Well, that I can see where that would contribute to feelings of loss. And because, especially if your mother was, kind of this, perfect mom, as you might have seen her. I mean, obviously you knew she wasn't perfect, but maybe she was nailing the mom job. Right.
Right.
And so
that was her job. She didn't, she didn't do other work. Well, she did.
But she did.
But yeah,
maybe your life she didn't. My whole life she did.
Such a hard worker, but that was her job, and she really did it well, and continues to do it well. But yeah, loss of of my expectations of myself, and then loss of like he couldn't ride a bike really, and that was the joy of my childhood. One of them was being able to ride a bike, and seeing all his other friends ride a bike. And then now in high school, like his friends are learning to drive and they're going to prom, and he's at home recovering from hip surgery, so there's grief I feel in the loss for him, and also in the experience that I thought that I would have as a mom. And then the experience of my other kids, like this all affects them as well. So yeah, there's grief there in a different way than losing a person.
Yeah.
I think,
it's like you grieve over losing the part of your life that you thought you were going to have.
Yeah.
That was a lot of my experience too.
And when you lose a person, you actually lose a lot of that as well. So it's something that I think we can relate to, even though the circumstances have been different. You lose who you thought you were going to be, the future you thought you were going to have, the routine you thought that that you were going to be engaged in. All of that gets disrupted. It may happen at different times and in different circumstances, but in that we can definitely relate to each other, I would say. So Tessa, you touched on finding out that your little baby at 6 weeks had cystic fibrosis, which I'm sure at that point you had no idea what that future looked like.
Nope.
Could you maybe talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. So they were just barely on the forefront of like finding new medications and treatments for them. And like a few years before, the life expectancy was like in the teens or the early 20s. And so that was like the first thing.
Oh my goodness.
That really hit me. And I remember sitting in church one day, and this girl, we were in like a young married congregation, and the only kids there were like young babies. And this mom raised her hand and made a comment about, I'm so excited to raise the next generation of young kids. And me, I'm thinking like, I'm not even that excited because I have no idea, is my child going to die? Like, you must have nothing to go through because this is painful for me.
Right.
And definitely the grief of like, this is not what I thought motherhood would be. Like Tanya and I grew up very different. She was like, I don't want to hold this baby. Anyone else's baby, get it away from me. And literally she would like hold it out from her body. And I was like, give me all the babies. Like I always was just always the one holding the baby.
Well, I was the oldest. I had to change your diapers.
I know.
Like, this does work. I don't want to have a baby.
But like I always wanted to have like 6 kids and like have all these kids and be the perfect mother. Like my mom, like our mom was like the OG Pinterest mom. Like that's who she was. And yeah. So, so yeah, there was a lot of grief there, just knowing that my life was going to be different. But let's see.
How did your husband
What's your
react?
question again? Oh my gosh, my husband is amazing. He also has type 1 diabetes, and he's had it since he was young. Your face.
Oh my gosh.
We have like a pharmacy at our house, don't worry.
Yeah, no
It's great. So he we're like getting all of this information, and I'm like over flooded with all this information. And we were going to the specialty hospital in Salt Lake City. We were going to Primary Children's every 4 weeks. We lived in Rexburg, so it was like a 4-hour drive every 4 weeks with this tiny infant.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just like this zombie mom, and he's like has all the questions, and he remembers all the information, and he's had to be compliant with medications his whole life. And so the doctor found out that he had diabetes, and she was like, great. We were like, what are you talking about? She's like, you know how it is to be compliant. And he's always been that person. Very much
what a crazy like preparation.
Yeah. It's been really good. And I'm kind of more the relaxed person of, oh, it's not going to be a big deal if we miss lung treatment tonight. Like,
right.
Especially now when they're older and they're like a lot more healthy. But so he was always just very compliant, and that made my job a lot easier. We had to have some very interesting conversations early on of like, okay, this is your responsibility so that I don't have to worry about it because I have too much to worry about already. And so we set those boundaries very early, and that's been a really good help. He takes care of this part of the medical stuff, and I take care of this part. I do all of the appointments, and I make sure all of the medications are ordered. And he like takes care of cleaning their nebulizers and all that stuff. So
that's a great like little, helpful hint there.
Yes, communication has been a 100% must have. The divorce rate for people with cystic fibrosis, the divorce rate is over 80%.
Oh, wow.
But I don't even know how I do it without him. I don't know anyone would get a divorce because like, I don't know how you would live by yourself.
I used to tell my husband sometimes, if you ever divorce me, tell me where you're going because I'm coming with you.
I know. Sadly, I'm like, if we get a divorce, I am not taking the children. I know that sounds so bad. But
just kidding, kids, if you listen to this later.
I know.
Mommy loves you.
To this, I love you, and I don't feel the same anymore, but there was a point.
Yeah.
So yeah, what was the other part of the question? I don't remember what we were talking about.
Yeah, I know. It's so easy to go onto a tangent, right? I just was curious about how you reacted to that information. And now,
we also were told. Sorry,
no, go ahead.
We also were told don't Google this because you will just
famous last words
die. But unlike Tanya, there is a huge amount of resources and a huge amount of support for CF. And they have a couple different foundations that do research and do stuff like that. And so they said, don't Google it, just go to this website and only read that stuff. And so we did start there. Unfortunately, we were at Primary Children's hospital, and they had just opened a brand new state-of-the-art cystic fibrosis center there. Wow. And so we had like the very best shiny new stuff. Then when we moved here and went to the Spokane clinic, it was a lot bit older and different. But yeah, they eased our transition pretty well. They had a lot of resources for us. They had a mentor group if we wanted to be mentored by a parent that had a kid with cystic fibrosis already. There's Facebook groups already. They gave us we get a health grant every year for things that we don't afford. We have a team of we have a social worker, and that's one thing that I was amazed that Tanya never had the resource to was some type of social worker.
We have had zero support. Like when you tell me about all the things you have for cystic fibrosis, because he doesn't fit in any category. Like we can't get we can't get the Social Security or the DDA waivers because it's not a disease. Dwarfism isn't a disease. But he can't walk. Like, he's in a wheelchair.
Right. It hugely impacts every aspect of his life.
And it's just so rare that there's not. Yeah, I mean, we have the Little People of America organization, which was helpful to just find a community that kind of gets it and has, some books you can read and stuff. But yeah, just, go to the doctor and they're like, we don't know anything about this. Like, we don't know what to do. We, no information. We go to Delaware now from Spokane because there's one doctor pretty much in the nation that knows anything about it. That one in Los Angeles passed away. And so yeah, that's another thing that adds, I think, to the, maybe not grief, but the stress and, just not knowing what to do or what's coming or who to believe or trust,
Even financial stress. It's a huge thing.
Yeah. Which I feel like we're fortunate that my husband has a good job and I do what I can to make some extra money, but it's still, we're not going on vacations or, our van's really old, like, like all that kind of stuff. Cause we're just like, we got so much therapy expenses and travel and all that stuff. But we make it work. I feel fortunate that, that has never been something that held us back. Cause we just make it work. But yeah, we're not getting any grants well, that's not true. We just got a little one to help with some physical therapy and stuff. But it's, when it's income based and they look at your income, like you're doing fine. So anyway, but
doing fine, but it's a lot of extra expenses that people aren't aware of, right? Again, these, any kind of experience that we have that feels outside of what we expect a normal life to be is very disruptive. It's very difficult.
When we were going through her diagnosis, my husband was just barely like getting to where he chose his major, and he literally chose his career based off the insurance that he would get right out of a bachelor's degree. That was very, very much on the radar. Like, I didn't find this out until like 2 years ago. Like, he was supposed to have an internship the year our daughter was born, which would have put him way farther ahead in finding a good job. But he didn't because he felt it was more important to have our family together. And like, our financial situation was weird.
So what do you think about that now? Looking back, do you feel like he made the right choice? Is it hard to make that judgment?
I wish that he would have told me earlier and that we could have made that choice together, because I think it might have been different. But I don't know. Like, you always look back and say, we would have changed things, but I really don't know. Because like, I was managing apartments and we got our rent for free. I had a pretty flexible job. It was still stressful, but
it says a lot.
So that was in the back of his mind too. If we moved for an internship, I wouldn't have had a job to come back to.
Right.
So it does say a lot about him. But at the same time, I feel bad
as a man, as a father.
I feel bad that he had to make that choice by himself.
So how about your children? I know you can't speak for them, but and I know yours are still pretty young, Tessa, but how do they manage through these ways that they are different?
My kids, I don't think they know they're different yet. Like they do when we get together with our cousins and stuff. But it's so routine for them now that it's just, most of what throws off their routine now is just their medication when they eat. And like, if I forget to give it to them, if they're going to a birthday party, which has happened a couple times, like, take your pills with you. My daughter's kind of past that part where it seems different. It's just how it is. But my son is kind of at that age where he's like, I don't want to do long treatments. Why do I have to do this?
Right.
And that's hard. And he's very stubborn. So, but they are pretty young. But at the same time, like, it sucks that me and my husband also have chronic illnesses, but it gives us a lot of leverage.
Yeah.
Because we could say, well, I don't want to do this either, but I have to have a healthy life. So, but Tanya, what is yours like? I feel like Calvin is older.
Yeah. So,
That's
well, at first too, he's just like, I'm a kid. Like, he didn't think he was different from anybody. He was born at an average height. So it's not like he was teeny tiny when he went to school. He was just kind of the same height as everybody else. But it was around second grade or so when the kids were starting to grow taller than him. And, he does walk differently and has to go to therapy and stuff. But I don't think he really knew that was different. Like you said, like it's just his life. But then, yeah, we went to a Little People of America gathering here in Spokane when he was about in second or third grade. And there's mostly achondroplasia. That's what most people think of when they think of dwarfism. But there's actually like 200 different kinds. But anyway, several people with that. And, Calvin's like, why do these people look funny? That was his question,
Calvin saying that about
yeah. And so, then I would explain like, oh, well, these people, have a thing called dwarfism. It just makes them shorter and look a little bit different. And I said, and you have a form of that too. And he's like, what? Like, no, I don't,
I love that.
And so, but yeah, that's when kind of he started to notice, and he went through an identity kind of crisis, I think, around that age. And that, because we never talked about metatropic dysplasia, right? Like, never said those words really in front of him. And that's about the time we wanted to go see that doctor in Delaware. And we did a fundraiser. We weren't as financially stable as we are now. And it was going to cost a lot for travel and stuff. And so we did a fundraiser, and I didn't want to do it. I was like, I'm pretty independent. I was like, I don't want to ask people for money. But it ended up being a good thing. Like, our community really rallied around us. Like, we talked about how I haven't really had support really, like Tessa does. And so that really helped me feel like our community cared about us and stuff. And I made a video that kind of told about metatropic dysplasia. And that's kind of the first time he really learned about it. And kind of struggled for a while. Like, he would tell people, he's like, I have metatropic dysplasia. And so, but I eventually, I was like, does that bother you? Like, you don't have to be defined by this. It's just how your body is, and it doesn't really matter. And he's like, oh, okay. So that's kind of been the attitude that we've tried to work toward,
Yeah.
But yeah, he did, for a while, like, oh yeah, I'm different from other kids. And then there was some bullying going on at school around that time. So that was kind of a hard time. And now, he just knows, like, this is just my life and it sucks sometimes. But it is how it is. And I think, like, he has this little group of friends, which I'm so grateful for, that he has some friends and they love him. They like he had this hip surgery last year, so he hasn't really been able to walk, and they'll like carry his wheelchair into their house so he can come play video games, and they just accept him as he is. And, it's kind of a little nerdy Dungeons and Dragons group of friends, but he's found where he fits in, right? And I think that's super important.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and he's 16 now, so he's getting older, and we've talked about, how will this affect his career? What will he be able to choose? And then, like, he's kind of felt like, I don't know how much to talk about on here because of his privacy, but he's like, I don't know if I'll ever have a girlfriend, or, I don't know if I'll ever get married, which has kind of broken my heart. Like, that's caused some grief, I've thought about that too. Like, am I ever gonna have, like, he already is like, I don't want to have kids, I don't want to pass this on to anyone, and so I've thought about that. But we've talked about how your body isn't the most interesting thing about you, right? Like, lots of people get married who can't walk or who are missing a leg, or that isn't what makes you valuable and special. And lots of people gravitate toward your spirit and your sense of humor. Like, those are things that attract me to a person. And so we've talked a little bit about that. I know for teenagers, the looks are pretty important, in attracting somebody. But I think as we get older, those aren't as important. And so I hope he'll find a mate someday and be able to have a family somehow and stuff like that. But those are all part of the grieving, I think, the things that might be a loss for you.
I have a question. I have
Sure.
always wondered this. So like you would send, I always notice this the most, like with your Halloween pictures, which is kind of funny, but it's always because you had all three kids in the same place, and we could gradually see the other kids like getting taller than him. I'm just wondering how he reacted to that as his siblings getting bigger than
that's
him.
been part, like it's just like a reality, and a lot of people will think he's, well, they did, not now, but people would think he's the younger sibling. Like his sister's 3 years younger, and they would think he was younger, but now they think he's a 30-year-old man because he's got this really deep voice. Like we go to the airport and they're like, "Can I have his passport?" I was like, "Oh, he's a minor." They're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he is way taller than we thought he would be. Like,
he is,
compared to a lot of other people with metatropic dysplasia, he's very tall. And my husband's 6'4" and I'm 5'8", so they think, that probably contributed, just the height genes there. And so we tell him he's lucky. We like celebrate every centimeter. We're like, yeah. No, I'm over 4 feet tall. Like, that was huge. We're like, yes. And I've told him that. I'm like, you're really not that short. Like, some people with dwarfism are 2 feet tall, adults. And so I think
finding these positives, finding these wins, these celebrations.
Celebrate. Yeah. And when we got a handicap placard for our car, which we didn't think of getting. Like, one time we're at the hospital and we're like, he really struggles to walk, very far. And they're like, have you gotten a handicap placard? And we're like, no, I didn't really think of it, because we didn't think of him as being handicapped for a while.
Well, I love that. Now, actually, that just shows how normal you have incorporated this into your life. That's so great.
Yeah. So, but now we sell, like, we're in a crowded, we're going to the game or something. There's a handicap spot. We're like, yes, thank you, Calvin. We get to put in a handicap spot.
His superpower.
Yeah. So, we find things like that to celebrate and try to have humor about it and just treat it like it is. This is what it is. It's not necessarily bad or wrong. This is just how life is for us. So,
Tanya, tell me about the way the community came together for you. You mentioned that briefly. I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think he was about 7, and we did. A mutual friend of ours. I'm drawing a blank on her. Ellen.
Ellen Bernardo.
Yeah. She. I barely knew her. Like, I just met her at church or a baby shower or something, and somehow we were friends on Facebook and kind of brought this up, like, we need to do a fundraiser, what should we do? And she just kind of like took the reins. She was like, let me help you. And so we did like a GoFundMe, which I didn't really want to do, just straight up ask people for money, but we had a cookie sell, like kind of a little event. And so, people donated cookies and that stuff. And then, people just donated money. I think we had some other kind of thing at the mat or something, I think, just to raise money. And I just felt really supported that people cared enough to help us, and really invested in Calvin. I think a lot from my social media, like I share about him and his life, and we interviewed him, like people asked questions and he gave his answers, and just feel like we've had a lot of support in that way. And just, as he's had surgeries, I'll share a little bit, and people are praying. I really had his first surgery. It was on his spine. They fused some of his spine together, and that was scary, like, but you have to sign all these papers saying, like, I know my child could die, like, we're not liable, all these things that could go wrong, and you're just like, oh my gosh, is this the best thing? Like, should we actually do this? Just all this weight, and we're having to go to Seattle from Spokane. Like, I think we drove over there like 12 times that year or something, maybe more, and had to stay over there for a couple weeks and find a babysitter for my other kids. And that was super stressful. But on the day of his surgery, like, so many people were praying for us, like 100 people, right? Like all around the world. And I just felt those prayers. I was at peace. I didn't feel anxiety or fear during the surgery and while we were at the hospital. And that was kind of gave me a testimony of the power of prayer and the power of knowing other people are thinking of you. That was really kind of a profound experience for me. and feeling supported.
I can relate to what you're saying. I have had times in my life when I could physically feel the prayers that people were saying in our behalf, especially right after Steve passed away. It was like I felt carried.
Yeah, that's how I felt too.
But yeah. So how has your faith affected this process or been affected by this experience?
That's an interesting question. I feel like we could have a whole nother podcast on our faith and my faith journey. When I was pregnant with Calvin, my husband actually told me he didn't believe in God anymore. And that was like shocking. Well, I mean, I kind of saw it coming, but didn't want to acknowledge it, and so that's probably, I've experienced the most grief in my life from that. I cried through my entire pregnancy. I was just like, and I didn't know, I was like, should we stay married? Like, I feel like having Calvin made our marriage stronger and kind of solidified my decision to stay in our marriage, because our faith and religion was so important to me in a marriage. But we've really grown together. I've learned a lot from that about love and choice and stuff like that. But I mean, my faith, I feel like in those moments of like terrible grief where like I couldn't even talk to anybody, I just, laying in bed, kind of crying. The only relief I could get from that was praying to Heavenly Father, and just feeling like he's telling me everything will be okay. Like, just have to keep going. So, but I also feel like, I've struggled with my faith at times, like, does God exist? I don't know. Like I used to feel like it was so black and white when I was a young person. But I have felt like, having my faith community and praying and studying my scriptures and just being together in our meeting house has lifted me up. So I've had periods of time where I didn't go to church. I had all these little babies and it was so hard to go by myself. But when I go and participate, I just feel the Spirit. I can't really deny it, And so it's just helped me so much to have that, knowledge or hope that we continue to exist after we pass away, and that our bodies will be made whole. That's been a big one for Calvin. And I feel like he believes that and hopes for that. So, and I've often thought about Christ healing the lame, and wondering, like, would I have enough faith to believe that he could heal my child? And could that happen? Like, why can't that happen now? I've asked myself that and kind of looked at the purpose that his disability has had in his life, and he's really enriched other people's lives and inspired them and helped me become a better person and appreciate my body. I feel like my whole life since I was a teenager or even a very young girl, I've hated my body or just felt uncomfortable in it or wished it was different. And the last several years I've thought, that is so ungrateful for me to not love the gift that God has given me in a body that can move and isn't in pain. Right. And so I've tried to like accept it and use it, right? Like I've been taking a dance class and I started rowing, just doing these things where I could move my body and celebrate it and use it while I can. My parents have had a lot of back pain and just stuff like that. And I'm just like, I'm going to use my body right now while I have the use of it. And that's the one thing that Calvin has taught me. And Tessa kind of talked about being prepared. And when I was a teenager, I went to work for my aunt who was a quadriplegic. I was her aide.
Oh, wow.
On the weekends. Okay. Yeah. Like when I was 12, we moved far away from my friends and it kind of sucked. I was like, this is lame. why do we have to move? But yeah, my parents' like motivation to go there was to be my Aunt Shirley, and like it was
And
kind of
care for
weird.
her.
Like yeah, so like it's my
Wow.
great aunt. It's my mom's aunt. And so and it was my dad
Wow.
who's like not even her direct relative that really felt called to go, move across the country and live here and take care of her. And so
Wow.
I've kind of felt like that was for me, right? Like
Yeah.
as a teenager, I was just like, this sucks. I don't want to be here. And when I graduated from high school, we moved away. Like, how crazy is that? My parents moved to Utah. And
Wow.
so I learned to, that's what I felt, right? Like that experience helped prepare me. I learned how to care, her personal care, going around the town with her in a wheelchair, like experiencing what that's like, how people react to her, and just
Right.
her. Was an amazing person, and just being able to know that like the wheelchair and not being able to walk was just like a logistical thing, right? Like it didn't
Wow.
really affect the impact she had on the world. Like she was a special ed teacher, and she impacted so many lives, and just to be able to experience that, I think really prepared me to be Calvin's mom. And so that, as far as my faith goes, that has been faith growing for me, I guess. Like I see the Lord's hand in my life.
Yeah.
That's one thing that this experience has helped me to see.
That's amazing, because as
Yeah.
you are describing this aunt, it sounds so much like the way Tessa was describing you. So
Interesting.
what an amazing thread that has pulled through
Mm-hmm.
that. And this is the thing, as we share these experiences and people get to hear the ways that we can impact others for good. It grows, and hopefully the world becomes a better place
Mm-hmm.
because
Right.
of this. Tessa, what would you say about your spiritual walk?
Mine was opposite of Tanya's.
Okay,
So
that's good to hear about that too.
when I am like really stressed or like really, I just kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but I don't really understand what I'm going through until I'm over it. And
Mm-hmm.
so for like 5 years until my son was born, probably, and ironically went on antidepressants at that time, I was just completely numb. Like I never felt the spirit at church. I didn't feel happiness. I didn't feel sadness. I
Mm-hmm.
was just numb for like 5 years. I'm a very emotional person, as you can tell on this call, and I didn't cry for 5 years, and it was very weird.
Right.
I
Well,
didn't
you
feel the
said before
spirit either.
you were in constant fight or flight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so like Tanya describing like how she would have conversations with Heavenly Father, like I didn't not believe, I just didn't feel anything. It
Right.
just was very, in our experience, like with cystic fibrosis children, they have a very weakened immune system. So for 6 months from like October to April, we were quarantined in our house every year. So
Mm-hmm.
like when the pandemic hit, we were like, maybe we can go outside because everyone else is wearing a mask. Sweet. So it was very different.
Right.
But, so every year we'd quarantine ourselves. We didn't go to church for 6 months out of the year, usually for those times. Finally, when we moved to Central Washington here, let's see, our daughter was probably 4 at this moment, 3.5. And finally, our bishop was like, do you want us to bring the sacrament to your house? And I was like, why didn't anyone offer this for the past 4 years? Like,
Right. Why doesn't that
so
even cross your mind, right?
I know. So that was a good thing. But then once my son was born, now that I'm realizing it, I didn't even realize that it was after I was put on medication, but I started to feel more things. And then it was like a flood of all the emotions that had been stored for 5 years, like came out.
Right.
And it was very confusing, actually. Like why was I so numb and now I'm just overflowing? But that's when I started to explore therapy and other models of more healing processes. And yeah, a lot of stuff came out.
That
But
makes
it
a
was
lot
very
of
interesting
sense.
seeing that process of like not even realizing that I wasn't feeling those feelings.
Right.
And then questioning like, oh, has my faith been affected by this? And of course, like it had. When you don't have those feelings for so long, it obviously takes an effect. But like Tanya said, like going to church and being with everyone there, that really helped me. So a lot of it wasn't even like the scriptures or leaning on my Heavenly Father, but more leaning on my community in the church setting. So and being able to feel the Spirit again was a really big deal. So
it sounds like, especially if you have half of the year that you can't even be with that community physically, it makes a big difference. And I think it's good for people to know that there can be a whole range of reactions to devastating loss, grief, pain, difficulty, that it's normal. Whatever you're experiencing, that is normal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it was interesting, like, just because you're not feeling that doesn't mean that your faith is gone. It doesn't mean that you don't believe anymore. It's just a thing that you need to get through. I think that's a big thing with grief that I've learned this year is like all of the feelings that you have to step through it. You have to step through the grief or else you're just stuck in one spot. You're stuck in that grief and you can't move forward. So
keep hearing that over and over again.
The biggest thing.
Yes, I keep hearing that over and over. You just have to go through it.
You have to give it a moment to feel it. Because that's one thing that I would do. I would just stuff my emotions and stuff all of my feelings further and further down. And then it just paralyzed me. It just numbed me out. So I've learned to feel my feelings, to not apologize for it, and to just feel it for a second and then move forward. And that's been the biggest help.
Well, and it's so good that you bring up the help that you have received by getting medication that makes up for these deficiencies happening inside of your brain and your body, that you have no control over that, right?
Yeah.
This life can be very, very difficult. And and obviously we're not put together in a way that we can sail through everything like it's a breeze, right? So what a blessing to have access to something that helped you to feel again, so that you could even comment on what your experience has been.
Yeah. And then having a therapist, my therapist is more like a coach, I think I would describe her as, but I started feeling all of the feelings and then I had no idea what to do with them.
Right.
And even like trauma from my childhood that I still hadn't worked through.
Right.
She's been able to teach me, okay, then this is what you need to do, or this is what's happening, and this is how you move forward. And that's been a huge thing.
That's amazing. And how about each other and your extended family? How has that connection helped you?
Do you want me to go?
Sure.
Okay. We have a really close family. Like, I feel like our parents have done a really great job of making sure we're close. Like when we were kids, my mom would be like, friends will come and go, but if you're good to your siblings, they'll always be there for you. And I feel like that with my siblings. We like have a WhatsApp group and we're always texting each other and, posting pictures of what's going on and just really support each other. I feel like they're the ones that I know will be there for me, And it's been interesting to share this experience with Tessa because we are 8 years apart. Our other sister's only 20 months younger than me. And so we've always been really close. And Tessa, sometimes I call my daughter Tessa. Like she seemed more like a daughter. I mean, we're only 8 years apart, but I had a hand in kind of caring for her.
You changed her diapers, right?
Yeah.
Gave her baths.
Right. Yeah. So it's been a good experience for us to kind of share this experience of the challenges that we've had and be able to help each other and support each other emotionally and physically, right? Like she comes to Spokane for their treatments and stays with us, and that's been kind of fun. And just to support each other. And then our parents, of course, are so great. I don't know. What do you think, Tessa? I feel like our parents are just there, right? Like if we need something.
Well, I did not feel that support from our parents as much. My kids have a little bit more nuanced care, and Tanya, I would probably give them to Tanya before my parents. But
I'm not talking about like taking care of them, but just like
I know, but
like hey mom, this is what I'm going through, like, and they're always encouraging.
Mom has always been the person for me. Like I would tell her what I'm going through and she'd just say, well, that's life. And I'm like, that didn't come from me at all. Like
I guess that's the attitude I have too, I guess. But.
So that was hard for me. And like our dad, I think it just stresses him out and scares him. So we just never talk about it. So, but like physical support, like my mom really wouldn't watch my kids overnight unless Tanya was there. Like that's happened a couple times. And Tanya's like, what's the big deal? Like they're getting old enough that
well,
it's not a big
our
deal.
Our parents are getting older too, though.
They are.
Any little kid is a lot. Like you said, Julie, right? Like you're watching your grandkid and you're like,
oh yeah,
they have so much energy.
It's true.
True. So but Calvin's the oldest grandchild, so that I think that was interesting. It'd be interesting to ask my parents, for your first grandbaby to be born and have something quote unquote wrong with them. But I feel like they just are like, this is our grandson, we're so happy to have him. And, it's challenging. It's painful to watch your kid or your grandkid be in pain all the time and have to go through surgeries and stuff like that.
See, mine are the youngest of the grandkids, and I feel like they're kind of just too tired.
I think
to do anything with them. So
I think that's a real thing. I think my youngest sibling would say the same. That she used to say that when she was still a child, our parents had become grandparents, and they were kind of like, okay, see you later. We're gonna go be grandparents now. But
Tanya has been there for me like every step of the way, especially when we moved to Washington.
Well, there you go. There you go.
I never question if she'll be there.
Yeah.
And that means a lot because I never had that sibling. She always had my sister. And my brother just always thought I was annoying and didn't want to hang out with me. So it's been incredible for our relationship. It's been really awesome.
So glad. I'm so glad to hear that. And thank you for coming and talking to me today. And thinking about someone who might be just starting this journey, and knowing that grief takes many forms. What do you think it means in your situation to grieve well? And Tessa, I'll start with you, and then Tanya, if you could finish up.
Well, I think I kind of already touched on this. Like, every traumatic experience, I feel like, is going to give us some type of grief. We're going to have grief from it. And if you don't know how to move on from that, then you need to find somehow to do that. Find someone to help you. But just find a way to move through it and find a way to take care of yourself. That's a big thing that we haven't talked about. Is self-care has been a huge thing. And I know it's a lot of times as parents or as mothers, we just forget we just forget about ourselves, and we get wrapped up so much as being a mother that we forget that we're our own person. And that's in 2020, my husband lost his job and I started my own business as well. Which Tanya's been an awesome help with that. And that kind of gave me another outlet, not just being a parent or a wife, but being
So
my own
remembering
person
that
and
you're
having
still
my
a
own
person.
thing. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm one that kind of hyper focuses on things. So there's been a little bit of balance issues. Sometimes I get like, it's all about me, and I forget that I have a family. So that's been another thing that you just have to have balance. You have to have balance. You have to remember that you're your own person. You need to take care of yourself so you can take care of your family.
Thank you. And Tanya, what would you say?
Yeah, so I mean, we talked a little bit about mindset shifts, and in our faith, I think everyone's like, "Oh, all the answers are in the scriptures," which maybe they are, but I found help, in other ways to change how I see the world. I guess one of them was the work of Byron Katie. I had it was actually a business coach, and we ended up working on my marriage, which I was like, what does that have stuff to do with my business? But I found like whatever we do in one area of our life, we do that in all the areas of our life. And so anyway, her philosophy is our thoughts aren't necessarily true. They're just thoughts. And that blew my mind. Like I was just my thoughts are true. They're reality for me, but questioning all of your thoughts to see, are these really true? Is this a truth I want to believe? And how is this experience something for me? Right. I thought another coach kind of taught me like everything that happens to us is for our benefit somehow. And if we can find that, then it just makes life so much more bearable. The Byron Katie's, her book is called Loving What Is, which I have not ever read, but I've worked through some of her tools, and, our suffering comes from not loving what is, I guess, being upset by how things are, or wishing they were different or something like that. So, and like Tessa mentioned, just keep going, right? Like you just have to go through the grief, and it will probably never go away. It's always going to be there somehow or come back, or, it's a feeling. And so, and giving yourself permission to also feel joy and all of the other emotions, and to live your life beyond the grief, I guess. Yeah.
So Tanya mentioned one thing that I kind of wanted to step back to discuss. She talked about how my Aunt Shirley and taking care of her really prepared her for Calvin. And this is something that I look back, and this is one thing that to me is like, okay, God has a plan for us. This is it. Like, so I've always been very medically minded, and no one in my family is. 0% of my family is medical minded except for me. And I've always been fascinated by that stuff. And then like the life that I have now, it's crazy.
Right.
Because
and
I have like a pocket nursing degree.
Right.
And it's just been really cool, like, to see how him preparing me for that from the past has been really inspiring. And
that sounds like another way to grieve well, is that awareness that there is a plan. And maybe not the plan. The plan isn't necessarily I want you to suffer, but the plan is there will be suffering, but there is a purpose for you. And it's clear that you've both been prepared for the calling of motherhood that has been introduced into your lives. And I am so grateful for all your thoughts, everything that you shared. Thank you for sharing so candidly with me and with others. I think it will be a great blessing.
Thank you. Yeah. I hope that you can get my words out through my sobbing.
I think a lot of people speak sob.
Speak sob.
Okay, so one thing I thought of to share with parents of kids with a rare disease or anyone who's going through something that they think is not fair is that you have a choice. And Tessa had her kids, I don't know, how much younger are your kids than mine? I think about 5 years younger or so than Calvin, maybe longer. But so one time she was just kind of upset, she was like, it was all kind of new and, she's so stressed out and just why is my baby like this? It's not fair. And I told her, we have a choice. You don't have to keep this baby, right? You could give it away. You could adopt it out. You could abandon it, leave him with your mother-in-law, right? Which people do, that's the choice that you could make. And so you could also just choose, this is my baby. I'm choosing them as they are. And that's super empowering. That was really empowering for me. And same with my marriage. When we were having some struggles, just decided, I'm going to choose this marriage every day and love it with the challenges that come with it. And that has made all the difference in how I've approached being a parent and a wife and just my life. This is my choice and I could change it. I could choose a different choice if I wanted to, right? Like I have the power to do that and I can choose what is. And that just really helped me to shift that kind of like, this isn't fair. Why is this happening to me?
Right.
Really empowered me to feel better about my life, I guess.
That's very powerful because a lot of times we think, no, I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're saying is your choice is how you are reacting to the situation that has presented to you. I love that.
Yeah, like we have a choice in how we react, right? Like we didn't have a choice like in a lineup of babies, I'm going to pick this one. But we have a choice in how we're going to deal with it and how we're going to move forward and live with it. So
thank you.
Yeah.